Could the celebrated love poetry of the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries have fundamentally distorted the image of women? What hidden motives and overlooked realities lie beneath the surface of the troubadour's art? Let us delve into the surprising portrayals found within these ancient verses. Number 1. The pure, unattainable lady, the Damna. The troubadour poetic tradition often elevates the female figure to a realm of unparalleled purity and perfection, a concept deeply entwined with the ideal of fin amour or courtly love. This portrayal presents the lady, frequently referred to as the Damna, as a being of exquisite beauty, unmatched grace, and supreme virtue. Her physical attributes are described in glowing terms, though often in generalities rather than specific details that might root her too firmly in the earthly realm. Her spiritual qualities are equally emphasized, making her a beacon of moral goodness and a source of inspiration for the aspiring lover. She embodies all desirable qualities, wisdom, nobility, kindness, and an almost divine allure. This idealized lady is typically beyond the reach of the poet's physical possession, often because she is married to a more powerful lord or exists in a higher social sphere than the troubadour himself. This inaccessibility is not a flaw in the love story, it is, in fact, a foundational element of the fin amour paradigm. The love is rarely consummated in a physical sense, remaining largely within the realm of longing, devotion, and spiritual aspiration. The lady's unattainability makes her a constant object of desire, a distant star guiding the poet's emotional and artistic journey. She is a symbol of perfection that the poet strives to be worthy of, rather than a person with whom he might share an intimate relationship. Consider the verses of Bernard de Ventadorn, a prominent troubadour whose songs frequently address this theme. In many of his cantos, he laments his unfulfilled longing for a lady who remains distant. He expresses his devotion through metaphors that elevate her to an almost celestial status. She is the most beautiful of all creatures, a lady so perfect that merely thinking of her fills him with a mixture of joy and exquisite pain. He describes his love as a service, a knightly devotion to his feudal lord, except that his lord is this idealized woman. He presents himself as her loyal servant, willing to suffer any hardship or rejection as long as he can continue to adore her from afar. This portrayal emphasizes her elevated status and the poet's humble, unwavering commitment to her ideal. From the complete poems of Bernard de Ventadorn, translated by Amelia C. Fields, 1988, page 112, we can observe lines where the poet declares his life's purpose is to serve the purest lady known to man. This reinforces her role as an object of unattainable veneration. Geoffrey Rudel, another troubadour, famously wrote of his Princess Loitaine, or distant princess. His love for her was entirely based on hearsay and reputation, a love without sight or direct interaction. This concept pushes the idea of the unattainable lady to its absolute limit, as the object of affection is not just physically distant but exists almost entirely as an abstract concept in the poet's mind. His entire poetic output is shaped by this longing for a woman he has never met, a love that thrives on distance and imagination. She is perfect precisely because she is unknown, allowing the poet to project all his ideals onto her without the messy intrusion of reality. His songs are less about the lady herself and more about the spiritual journey. Her imagined presence inspires within him. This focus shifts the narrative away from the woman's personal qualities towards the poet's internal experience. See Songs of Geoffrey Rudel, edited by George C.W. Herbert, 1929, for poems detailing this profound, unfulfilled devotion to a lady known only by reputation. The virtues attributed to the Damna often include wisdom, discretion, mesura, and moral excellence. She is rarely impulsive or flawed. Her actions are generally presented as judicious, and her character as impeccable. Her gaze alone can transform the poet, inspiring him to greater nobility and artistic endeavor. Her perfection is not merely passive. It is an active force that refines the lover, purging him of baser desires and leading him towards higher spiritual aims. This is often framed as the purifying effect of true love. The lady, by her very nature, acts as a moral compass for the poet, guiding him towards virtuous conduct. She is a static ideal, a fixed point of reference in the poet's emotional universe, rather than a dynamic individual with her own evolving personality or desires. Her role is to be the pure object, the standard of excellence. This depiction of the lady as a figure of flawless grace and remote majesty establishes a specific dynamic in the poetry. The troubadour's love for her is often presented as a source of both profound joy and intense suffering. The joy comes from the sheer perfection of her being and the honor of serving her, while the suffering arises from the unlikelihood of ever truly possessing her or receiving her full favor. Yet, this suffering is also seen as ennobling, a sign of the poet's deep and genuine affection. He considers it a privilege to experience such lofty emotions even if they remain unrequited. The unattainable lady thus becomes the ultimate muse, perpetually inspiring songs of longing, praise, and heartfelt devotion, all while remaining an idealized construct rather than a tangible, breathing person. This portrayal serves the poetic framework, where the lady functions as a catalyst for the troubadour's art and emotional exploration. The Domna is a constant, shimmering ideal, forever just out of reach, ensuring the perpetual motion of the troubadour's poetic pursuit. Number 2, the cruel, indifferent mistress. While troubadour poetry frequently presents the lady as an object of pure admiration and unattainable perfection, another recurring portrayal casts her in the role of the cruel, or indifferent mistress. This depiction is not a contradiction to the idealized image, but rather an integral part of the Finnemore dynamic. The lady, despite the troubadour's fervent devotion, often remains aloof, unresponsive, or even actively dismissive of his pleas and declarations of love. Her coolness, her lack of reciprocal affection, and her seeming indifference to the poet's suffering become central themes in many troubadour songs. This cruelty is not necessarily a malicious act on the lady's part, but rather her steadfast refusal to grant favor, solace, or an easing of the poet's torment. She guards her affections jealously, withholding her compassion and leaving the lover in a state of perpetual longing and unfulfilled desire. The poet laments her harshness, her coldness, and her refusal to acknowledge his profound love, even as he simultaneously praises her beauty and virtue. Her indifference amplifies the poet's suffering, a suffering that is paradoxically celebrated as proof of his genuine and profound affection. The more she holds back, the more intensely he is seen to love. Consider the work of Rainbow Dorenga, whose poems sometimes feature this theme. He expresses profound frustration and anguish over his lady's lack of response. He speaks of being slain by her refusal, and dying of longing because she gives him no sign of hope, yet he never condemns her for this. Instead, her unresponsiveness is presented as a challenge, a testament to her high standards, or even a form of divine testing of his worthiness. He might accuse her of harshness, but always within the context of his unwavering loyalty to her. His suffering is his badge of honor, proof of his devotion. From The Lyrics of Rainbow Dorenga, edited by Walter T. Pattison, 1952, page 91, one can find lines detailing the poet's despair at his lady's stone heart and her refusal to cast a single glance of pity. Such descriptions emphasize her powerful hold over his emotional state. Pierre Vidal, another troubadour, also explored the anguish caused by an unyielding lady. He portrays himself as a loyal servant, perpetually striving to earn a single sign of approval from his mistress. He might express desperation, stating that her lack of compassion is killing him slowly, yet his dedication never wavers. The lady's distance acts as a constant spur to his poetic creativity, fueling his laments and praises alike. Her cruelty is not a personal flaw, but a dramatic device that allows the troubadour to showcase his emotional depth, resilience, and unwavering commitment. For her, rejection, far from ending the relationship, becomes the very fuel that sustains the one-sided devotion. See The Poetic Works of Pierre Vidal, edited by Alfred Jeanroy, 1914, which contains numerous examples of a lover's plea for mercy from an impassive lady. The lady's indifference serves several purposes within the Finnemore framework. First, it maintains her elevated status. If she were too easily won, her value might diminish. Her aloofness reinforces her purity and her high moral standing, making her worthy of prolonged and arduous courtship. Second, it allows the poet to demonstrate his perseverance and the sincerity of his love. His willingness to suffer endlessly without complaint, his unwavering loyalty despite her rejection are presented as virtues that ennoble him. The poet's suffering is not just an emotional state, it is an active display of his Pretsworth and valor courage in the pursuit of love. He is a martyr to love, and her cruelty makes him so. This portrayal also highlights the power dynamic inherent in courtly love. The lady holds all the power in granting or withholding favor, while the troubadour is in a position of humble supplication. Her indifference underscores her autonomy and control within this specific romantic context. She is the dispenser of grace, and her decision to withhold it plunges the poet into despair, yet also compels him to greater poetic heights. The unrequited nature of the love, sustained by the lady's coldness, becomes the engine of the poetic expression. The dramatic tension generated by her cruelty is what keeps the lyrical narrative engaging and the lover's pursuit eternal. The lady's unresponsiveness is therefore not a fault in her character, but a necessary element that defines the very essence of the troubadour's art and his enduring devotion. Number 3, the silent object of desire. In the vast majority of troubadour poems, women are almost entirely silent. They are seen, praised, lamented over, and desired, but their voices, thoughts, and independent agency are conspicuously absent. The troubadour's world is one where the male poet speaks, and the female beloved is spoken about. She exists primarily as an object of observation and contemplation for the male gaze and the male voice, rather than as a participant in a dialogue or a subject with her own internal life and expressed desires. Her presence is pivotal, but it is a presence defined by her being observed, not by her acting or speaking. The poems are filled with the poet's declarations of love, his hopes, his fears, his praises, and his laments, all directed at or about the lady. He describes her beauty, her virtues, her effect on him, and her perceived indifference. Yet, the lady herself rarely, if ever, offers a direct response within the poems. Her reactions are usually inferred or described by the poet: a cold glance, a dismissive gesture, a subtle hint of favor, or, most often, no sign at all. Her inner world, her motivations, her opinions on the troubadour's affections are left unexplored. She remains an enigma, a canvas upon which the poet projects his own romantic narrative. Take, for example, the songs of Bertrand de Born, though his work is more often political and martial than purely amorous. Even in his more romantic pieces, the lady remains a silent muse. His focus is on the impact of his feelings, on the nature of his devotion, or on the feudal obligations love implies. The lady is the distant recipient of his affections, whose presence is felt through his description of her effect on him, not through any direct engagement or statement of her own. Her silence in the poems allows the poet to maintain complete control over the narrative of the relationship, shaping it according to his own emotional needs and poetic conventions. This lack of verbal interaction ensures that the lady remains an ideal, unburdened by the complexities of a real human voice. This portrayal is strongly linked to the concept of the domina as an idealized figure and the dynamic of courtly service. As the object of worship, the lady is more of a symbol than a person. Her silence reinforces her status as an unattainable ideal. Speaking would humanize her, perhaps diminish her aura of mystery and perfection. Her role is to inspire, not to converse. The poet speaks for her, interpreting her beauty and her perceived coldness as forces that refine his character and deepen his artistic expression. He gives voice to her beauty, her virtue, and the despair she causes him, but never to her own perspective. One of the rare exceptions to this widespread silence can be found in a very specific subgenre of troubadour poetry known as the tenso or pardomen, which are debates or poetic disputes between two or more troubadours. Even rarer are the coblas esparsas, or individual stanzas, where a woman might be presented as speaking. However, these are typically not expressions of the lady from Fenimore responding to her suitor. Instead, they are often fictionalized debates where a woman's perspective is presented by a male troubadour, or they involve exchanges between women troubadours troubarettes and male troubadours, a distinct and much smaller body of work. For the mainstream canso of courtly love, the lady's voice is conspicuously absent. For examples of this widespread silence, one can look at the Troubadour Poets, edited by Barbara Smythe 1968, which illustrates how throughout countless poems, the lady's reactions are reported by the poet, never expressed by her directly. The silence of the lady in troubadour poetry ensures that the narrative remains firmly centered on the troubadour's experience. Her presence is a catalyst for his emotions, his art, and his internal struggles. She functions as a silent, beautiful mirror reflecting the poet's devotion and suffering. This allows the troubadour to explore themes of longing, perseverance, and the purifying power of unrequited love without the complexities that would arise from a reciprocal emotional exchange. Her silence is not merely a stylistic choice, it is fundamental to the construction of the courtly love ideal, where the lady serves as an abstract object of desire and inspiration rather than an active speaking subject. The poet's monologue is unbroken, ensuring that his perspective dominates the narrative of love and desire. Number 4, the femme fatale or deceitful woman. While the prevailing image of the woman in troubadour poetry is that of the pure, unattainable lady, there is a counter-narrative, often found in satirical or less formal genres, that portrays women as deceitful, manipulative, or even actively harmful to the lover. This portrayal stands in stark contrast to the idealized domina, suggesting a more cynical or realistic view of female character, or perhaps a frustrated reaction to the strictures of courtly love. These women are not objects of worship, but figures of suspicion, whose beauty is a snare and whose affections are fickle. In this less romanticized depiction, the woman is often depicted as unfaithful, easily swayed by wealth or flattery, and prone to betraying the trust of her admirers. Her beauty is not a sign of inner virtue, but a dangerous mask that conceals a calculating or morally questionable nature. She is a source of suffering, not through her coldness or indifference, but through her active disloyalty or cunning. This type of portrayal is typically found in genres like the Cervantes, a poetic genre, often political or satirical, plan lament, or in certain tensos where the poet expresses disillusionment with love or women in general. Marcabrew, an early and often morally didactic troubadour, sometimes adopted a cynical view of women and love, particularly in his Cervantes. He frequently criticizes false love and those who engage in it, and some of his critiques extend to women who are deemed to be promiscuous or unfaithful. He uses harsh language to denounce those who do not adhere to his strict moral code of true love. His poems can describe women who are easily corrupted by material gain or social climbing, abandoning true affection for superficial advantages. He presents these women as sources of moral decay and lamentable choices. Such depictions clearly break from the idealized image of the Domina, offering a starkly negative portrayal that highlights moral failing. C. The Songs of Marcabrew, edited by Simon Gaunt, Ruth Harvey, and Linda M. Patterson, 2000, for examples of his often scathing social commentary, which sometimes includes condemnations of female behavior. Another aspect of the deceitful woman portrayal involves her using her charms to exploit the troubadour or to play him against other suitors. She might lead him on only to abandon him for another, or she might use his affections for her own social or personal gain without genuine feeling. This is not the passive indifference of the Domina, but an active manipulation. The poet, in these instances, is the victim of her wiles, suffering not from unattainable love, but from betrayal and exploitation. This shifts the blame from the poet's unworthiness to the woman's inherent perfidy. Giraud de Bornel, while primarily known for his lyrical cantos, occasionally touches upon themes of faithlessness and the difficulty of finding true love, sometimes implying women's complicity in such disappointments. While not as overtly condemnatory as Marcabrew, his poems can reflect a broader skepticism about the consistency of human affection, extending to the female beloved. This portrayal acknowledges that women, like men, can be flawed and motivated by self-interest rather than existing solely as embodiments of virtue. The idea of the false friend or deceitful lover can encompass both genders, but when applied to women, it directly challenges the idealized Domina image. The collected works of Giraud de Bornel, edited by Adrian Barrett, 1982, offers insights into his varied perspectives on love and human nature. This alternative portrayal serves as a stark counterpoint to the Domina ideal. It suggests a pragmatic, perhaps disillusioned, perspective on love and relationships, often arising from direct experience or a general societal critique. The femme fatale or deceitful woman highlights the dangers of love, the possibility of heartbreak not just from rejection, but from betrayal. She represents the chaos and moral ambiguity that stand in opposition to the order and purity of Fenimore. This demonstrates that troubadour poetry was not monolithic in its depiction of women. Alongside the ethereal muse, there existed the shadow of the manipulative and untrustworthy figure, a reminder of the potential for human failing even within the pursuit of love. Number 5. The trope of the lady as feudal lord. A central metaphor in troubadour poetry, particularly within the framework of Fenimore, is the consistent portrayal of the lady as a feudal lord and the poet as her loyal vassal. This pervasive trope frames the romantic relationship in terms of the established social hierarchy of the medieval feudal system, rather than as an interaction between two individuals with equal standing. The language used to describe the lover's devotion mirrors precisely the language of homage, service, and loyalty, owed by a knight or vassal to his suzerain. The lady assumes the authority and power of a lord, while the troubadour adopts the humble, subservient position of a sworn servant. The troubadour typically swears fealty to his lady, pledging his unwavering service and obedience. He refers to her as my lord Midons, a term that is grammatically masculine in Occitan, underscoring her assumed male authority and power within this metaphorical structure. He offers his heart, his life, and his poetic skill as a form of homage, expecting nothing in return but perhaps a sign of her grace or acknowledgement. This service is presented as a moral and spiritual obligation, akin to the loyalty a knight owes his lord in battle or in court. The lady, in this framework, holds the ultimate authority over the troubadour's fate and happiness. Her approval, or lack thereof, dictates his emotional state and his public standing. Take, for instance, the poems of Bernard de Ventadorn, who frequently employs this feudal metaphor. He speaks of his love as a form of homage, homnach, and himself as his lady's men homme, expressions directly borrowed from feudal terminology. He seeks her, mercy merce, a term that in feudal law referred to a lord's benevolent discretion towards a vassal. He describes his suffering not as the pain of unrequited love, but as the burden of a loyal servant who has not yet received his lord's favor. His constant supplication for a gift or a sign from her echoes the vassal's plea for land or protection from his lord. The dynamic is one of absolute power residing with the lady and absolute submission with the troubadour. From Bernard to Ventador in Complete Songs, edited by Stephen G. Nichols, Jr., 1965, one can observe multiple instances where the poet likens his devotion to a vassal's loyalty to a sovereign. Another prominent example is found in the work of Arnaut Daniel, whose complex poetry often explores the nuances of Finamore. Even amidst his intricate rhymes and demanding forms, the underlying feudal structure of the love relationship is clear. He presents himself as bound by the strictures of his devotion, unable to deviate from the service of his lady. He refers to himself as her liege man and speaks of serving her day and night, reinforcing the idea that his entire existence is dedicated to her. This constant repetition of feudal terminology transforms the romantic encounter into a social contract, governed by loyalty and hierarchy, where the woman is not a beloved equal, but a commanding figure. The Canzoneri of Arnaut Daniel, edited by Gianfranco Contini, 1960, provides rich examples of this intricate linguistic framework. The sustained metaphor deeply impacts the portrayal of women. It places the lady in a position of power and authority, but it is a power defined by male societal structures. She is powerful because she is like a lord, not because she embodies an inherently female form of authority. Her agency is often limited to the granting or withholding of favor, much like a feudal lord granting or denying a fief. She rarely initiates action or expresses personal desires outside of this lordly role. The troubadour's identity becomes entirely defined by his service to her, and his success is measured by his ability to perform this service faithfully, regardless of the outcome. The feudal trope also allows the poet to interpret his own suffering and unrequited love as noble service, rather than personal failure. His pain is a sign of his fidelity and his moral strength, just as a vassal's endurance in battle reflects his loyalty. The lady, as the ultimate authority, is not to be questioned. Her decisions, even if they cause him pain, are seen as just within this established system. This portrayal molds the lady into a specific social archetype, a figure of authority defined by masculine power structures, effectively abstracting her from her individual identity and placing her within a predetermined role that supports the troubadour's narrative of service and devotion. The poetic landscape is thus organized around a hierarchy that positions the lady at the apex, but always within terms dictated by the male feudal system. Number 6, the woman as a prize or commodity. Beyond the idealized domina and the feudal lord metaphor, troubadour poetry, particularly in certain genres or contexts, can portray women as objects to be acquired, exchanged, or possessed. This perspective strips women of their individual identity and agency, reducing them to valuable assets in social, political, or economic transactions. This is often seen in songs that deal with marriage, abduction, or political alliances, where women's roles are defined by their utility in securing power, wealth, or status for men. They are presented as commodities whose value lies in their lineage, dowry, or political connections rather than their personal qualities or desires. In songs that touch upon marriage, women are frequently depicted as instruments for forging alliances between noble families. Their marriages are strategic arrangements, and the woman herself becomes the medium through which wealth and power are transferred or consolidated. The troubadour might lament the forced marriage of a beloved lady to another, but the underlying narrative often treats the woman's choice or feelings as irrelevant in the face of political expediency. She is a pawn in a larger game, her value measured by the prestige or land she brings to the union. Her personal happiness or inclinations are rarely discussed, reflecting a societal view where women's marriages were largely dictated by family interest. Consider the Cervantes that sometimes commented on contemporary political events, including marriages between powerful houses. While not always directly about the woman, these songs often discuss the political ramifications of such unions, treating the bride as a given part of the deal. Her role is to be transferred from one family to another, ensuring lineage and cementing alliances. Her identity as an individual is subsumed by her function as a valuable asset in dynastic calculations. For examples of this approach, one can refer to the Political Songs of Bertrand de Born, edited by William D. Payton, Jr., 1982, which frequently discusses marriages of convenience among the nobility. Another aspect of this portrayal appears in songs that deal with abduction or the winning of a lady through force or cunning. While less common in the lyrical canso, such themes exist in certain narrative poems or satirical pieces. In these instances, the woman is quite literally a prize to be won or seized, her consent being secondary or entirely irrelevant to the male protagonist's actions. The emphasis is on the man's prowess in acquiring her, whether through a physical act or a clever scheme, rather than on any mutual affection or regard. She is an object to be taken, reflecting a possessive attitude where women are seen as property. For example, in medieval romances and narratives that influenced or were influenced by troubadour culture, stories of abduction were not uncommon. While troubadours primarily focused on courtly love, the societal context included these darker elements. Even within the poetic themes, the fear of a lady being taken by a rival or given in marriage against the troubadour's wishes often highlights her status as something that can be transferred or lost, rather than someone who makes her own choices. The lady's personal autonomy is often overlooked in favor of her status as a possession or a valuable asset. This depiction reveals a fundamental imbalance in the portrayal of gender agency. The men in these narratives are the active agents. They propose, they fight, they acquire. The women are the passive recipients. They are given, they are taken, they are possessed. Even when they are idealized as damnas, their perfection often serves the purpose of elevating the male lover's spiritual journey. When they are seen as commodities, their value is defined by external factors and male interests. This type of portrayal underscores a societal framework where women's lives, bodies, and destinies were frequently subject to male control and decision-making, reducing them to valuable possessions within a patriarchal system. The poetic representation reflects this societal reality, presenting women as objects to be manipulated or exchanged for male gain. Number 7, the lady as a mirror for the poet's virtues. In troubadour poetry, the lady's beauty, grace, and perfection are often presented not merely as intrinsic qualities worthy of admiration, but as a means to reflect and amplify the troubadour's own noble intentions, profound suffering, and exceptional poetic skill. She serves as a beautiful, silent mirror in which the poet sees his own elevated emotions and artistic capabilities. The lady's essence becomes a catalyst for the poet's self-expression and a testament to his moral and artistic worth. Her role is less about her own identity and more about what she inspires in the male lover. The concept of phenomenon posits that true love refines the lover, purging him of base desires and elevating his spirit. In this framework, the lady is the source of this ennobling power. Her perfection is what inspires the poet to become a better, more virtuous man. His suffering for her, his patient endurance of her indifference, and his unwavering loyalty are all presented as virtues directly attributable to her inspiring presence. He portrays himself as an embodiment of Pretsworth and valor courage because he loves such an incomparable being and persists despite the odds. The lady's unattainable nature makes his continued devotion a heroic act, showcasing his steadfast character. Consider the prolific work of Bernard de Ventadorn. He frequently attributes his poetic talent directly to the lady's influence. He might declare that her beauty makes his words flow like a river, or that her grace is the sole reason he is able to compose such exquisite songs. His lamentations about his unrequited love are not merely expressions of despair, they are also demonstrations of his profound capacity for feeling, his sensitivity, and his commitment. He uses his emotional anguish to prove his authenticity and the depth of his devotion, all of which are inspired by the lady. The purity of her being, as he portrays it, is what makes his own love pure and deserving of merit. From The Medieval Lyric, translated by Peter Dronke, 1968, page 101, one can find examples where poets explicitly state that their poetic voice is a direct gift from their beloved. Geoffrey Roudel's Princesse Lointaine offers another compelling example. His love for a lady he has never met is entirely an internal experience, a spiritual longing that transcends physical presence. In his poems, the lady functions as an abstract ideal that fuels his spiritual journey and artistic creation. His suffering, his longing for a distant paradise, is presented as a sign of his deep soul and noble spirit. The lady, in this case, is not a person at all, but a pure symbol of his own yearning for the transcendent. Her abstract perfection reflects his spiritual aspiration, making his poetry a mirror of his own idealized inner world. The lady's existence is almost entirely contingent on her role in enhancing the poet's virtues and emotional landscape. See Geoffrey Roudel L'Amour de Loin by Michel Zink, 2000, which delves into how Roudel's distant lady is primarily a projection of his own longing. The lady's cruelty or indifference also serves to reflect the poet's virtues. Her refusal to grant favor allows the troubadour to showcase his patience, his humility, and his unwavering constancy. His ability to endure suffering for the sake of love, without complaint or resentment, is presented as a testament to his exceptional character. The pain he experiences becomes a noble badge, demonstrating the depth and purity of his affection. This dynamic ensures that even when the love is unrequited, the narrative remains focused on the poet's moral and emotional growth, with the lady acting as a catalyst for his self-improvement and artistic output. Ultimately, the lady's portrayal as a mirror means that her true identity and agency are secondary to her function in the troubadour's self-narrative. She exists to inspire, to ennoble, and to provide the dramatic tension necessary for the poet to display his virtues. Her perfection is not for her own sake, but for the effect it has on the lover. She is the beautiful object that reflects the subject's worth, ensuring that the troubadour's internal world and artistic capabilities remain at the center of the poetic universe. The lady's reflection reveals the poet's own ideals, making her a means to an end in his artistic and emotional journey. Number 8. The limited scope of female experience in troubadour poetry. Troubadour poetry, despite its intricate lyrical forms and emotional depth, presents a remarkably narrow and circumscribed view of female experience. All women are typically confined to a very specific set of roles within the poetic narrative, primarily that of the idealized beloved, the distant object of desire, or the symbol of noble inspiration. Their lives outside of their relationship to the male lover are rarely, if ever, explored. This limited scope fails to acknowledge the multifaceted realities of women's lives in medieval society, ignoring their domestic duties, economic contributions, political roles, or personal relationships beyond the romantic pursuit. The vast majority of troubadour poems focus almost exclusively on the troubadour's internal emotional landscape and his relationship with the domina. The lady is always presented in relation to the poet. She is the one he loves, the one he serves, the one who causes him joy or suffering. Her existence is defined by her effect on him. There is little to no insight into her daily routines, her friendships, her interactions with her family, or her personal aspirations. She is not shown engaging in conversation with others, managing a household, participating in courtly life beyond being admired, or making decisions that affect her own destiny. Her world is primarily depicted as static, existing solely as the backdrop for the troubadour's declarations of love. Consider the common themes: longing, devotion, secrecy, unrequited love, despair, and moments of ephemeral joy. All these themes center on the troubadour's feelings and actions. The lady's contributions to the relationship, her internal thoughts, or her active participation are notably absent. Even when she is portrayed as cruel or indifferent, this is an interpretation of her actions by the poet, not an expression of her own motivations or feelings. Her agency is almost entirely defined by her power to grant or deny favor, which is itself a passive power in response to the troubadour's active pursuit. Even in the rare instances where women troubadours, known as troubadours, compose poems, their works, while providing female perspectives, often still operate within the established conventions of courtly love, limiting the scope of female experience presented. While some troubadours might express a more assertive or critical stance, or engage in poetic debates with male troubadours, their numbers were few, and their works represent a smaller fraction of the overall troubadour corpus. Their existence proves that women could and did compose, but their voices did not fundamentally alter the dominant portrayal of women in troubadour poetry as a whole. For an exploration of the troubadours and their particular expressions, one may consult The Women Troubadours by Meg Bogan, 1976. However, it is important to note that even these works, while significant, constitute a minority within the troubadour tradition. The omission of broader female experiences means that the troubadour's vision of women is severely limited to a particular romantic ideal. It ignores the significant social and economic roles women played in medieval society, from managing estates in their husband's absence to engaging in trade, holding positions within religious orders, or raising children. Troubadour poetry does not reflect the complexity of female lives, but rather distills womanhood into a singular, narrowly defined romantic function. The portrayal is essentially one-dimensional, serving the specific aesthetic and emotional requirements of Fenimore. This restricted scope effectively silences the broader narrative of women's lives. It focuses exclusively on how women function within the male poet's romantic framework, neglecting their multifaceted identities as individuals with diverse experiences and contributions to society. The woman in troubadour poetry is primarily a projection and embodiment of specific romantic ideals, rather than a representation of the rich and varied reality of medieval womanhood. Her world is confined to the narrow stage of courtly love, and her experiences beyond that stage remain largely unseen and unheard in the celebrated verses of the troubadours. Number 9. The dehumanizing nature of extreme idealization. While the idealization of the lady in troubadour poetry might initially seem like a form of praise, its extremity can lead to a dehumanizing effect. When a woman is elevated to a flawless, almost divine status, she ceases to be a human being with individual flaws, complexities, and personal agency. Instead, she becomes an abstract concept, a symbol of perfection that serves the poet's artistic and emotional needs. This relentless elevation strips away her individuality, transforming her into an ethereal embodiment of virtue rather than a living, breathing person. The troubadour's lady is often described with superlatives that remove her from the realm of human reality. She is the most beautiful, the most virtuous, the most gracious, the most perfect woman to ever exist. Her beauty is often so blinding that it is compared to the sun, her character so pure that it is likened to an angel's. This constant hyperbole, while intended to convey profound admiration, also places her beyond human experience. She is no longer someone who might make a mistake, feel a petty emotion, or simply exist as an ordinary individual. She is a flawless ideal, eternally perfect and unchanging. Consider the relentless praise found in the cantos of Bernard de Ventadorn, where his lady is depicted as beyond compare in every conceivable quality. He describes her with such unblemished perfection that she becomes more of a concept than a person. His focus is on her transcendent qualities, which are almost impossibly perfect. He attributes to her virtues that border on the superhuman, making her less relatable and more of an icon. This degree of idealization means that any real woman could never live up to such standards, setting up an unattainable benchmark that exists only in the poetic imagination. From The Troubadours, an Anthology, by Frederick Golden, 1973, page 77, one can observe poems where the lady is consistently described as a celestial being, utterly without human imperfection. This extreme idealization means that the lady's perceived cruelty or indifference is often attributed not to her own will or circumstances, but to her impossibly high standards, or as a test of the poet's worthiness. She cannot be flawed, therefore. Any perceived negative action on her part must be interpreted in a way that preserves her perfect image. She is not allowed to have bad days, make poor decisions, or simply not be interested in the troubadour. Her perfection is inviolable, making her a static figure rather than a dynamic individual. This lack of human imperfection paradoxically makes her less human. Moreover, her perfection often serves as a reflection of the poet's own nobility and artistic skill. Her flawlessness validates his pure love and inspires his exquisite poetry. In this way, her idealized image is instrumental to the troubadour's self-definition and poetic purpose. She exists as a means to an end, a perfect backdrop against which the troubadour can display his devotion, suffering, and artistic prowess. Her primary function becomes to inspire and ennoble the male poet, rather than to exist as an autonomous being with her own inherent value and personal story. The dehumanizing aspect of this extreme idealization lies in the removal of her individuality and the denial of her human complexity. She is not allowed to be imperfect, to have conflicting emotions, or to act outside the narrow parameters of the idealized muse. This turns her into a two-dimensional figure, a literary construct serving a specific poetic agenda rather than a nuanced representation of a woman. The troubadour's relentless praise, while seemingly honoring her, effectively removes her from the realm of human experience, leaving behind only a perfect, yet ultimately hollow ideal. The consequence is that the woman depicted in troubadour poetry becomes an object of worship rather than a subject of genuine human interaction, a symbol rather than a person. Number 10, the conflation of laddie and love as an abstract concept. Troubadour poetry frequently blurs the lines between the physical lady and the abstract concept of love itself, often to the point where the specific woman becomes interchangeable with the ideal of Fenimore. The lady, the Damna, is not simply a person who inspires love, she becomes the very embodiment of love, honor, and virtue. This conflation elevates the abstract concept of courtly love, making it the true object of the troubadour's devotion, with the lady serving as its living, breathing, but ultimately secondary manifestation. The love is for the ideal, and the lady is merely its vessel. This abstraction means that the qualities praised in the lady are often generic virtues associated with Fenimore rather than specific individual traits. She embodies joy, cortesia courtesy, pretz-worth, and mesura moderation. These are qualities that reflect the ideals of courtly society and the refined nature of the love itself. The lady's beauty and character are praised in terms that could apply to any idealized woman, making her less of a distinct individual and more of a repository for abstract ideals. The troubadour's poetry is often an exploration of Fenimore through the lens of a particular woman, rather than a profound study of that woman herself. Consider the pervasive use of the senhal, a poetic code name for the lady as discussed in an earlier point. These senhals, like Canort, comfort, bon espoir, good hope, or Belvezers, fair sight, are not personal names but abstract qualities or states of being. When the troubadour addresses my comfort, he is addressing the solace and emotional support he finds in the ideal of love, rather than a specific individual named comfort. The senhal further divorces the lady from her personal identity, transforming her into a walking, talking symbol of the abstract qualities associated with Finamore. This linguistic choice signals that the true object of devotion is the ideal, not necessarily the person. From An Introduction to the Study of Troubadour Poetry by Maurice O'Sullivan, 1999, which highlights how senhals often personify abstract virtues. Furthermore, the troubadour's love is often depicted as a self-sustaining force, capable of existing even without the lady's direct acknowledgement or even her physical presence. Geoffrey Rudel's Princess Lointain is the ultimate example of this. His love is for an ideal of perfection that he has heard about, not for a woman he has ever met. The love is for the concept of the perfect lady, not for a specific person with whom he has a relationship. The lady is merely the distant point of reference for this abstract passion. His journey and his poetic output are fueled by an idealized image, proving that the love itself is the primary subject, with the lady serving as its symbolic representation. See Geoffrey Rudel, The Prince of Blay, and The Love from Afar by L.H.D. St. George, 1935, for detailed analysis of this highly abstract love. This conflation means that the lady's personal identity, her unique experiences, and her specific character traits are subsumed by the abstract ideals she represents. She is not loved for who she is, but for what she symbolizes within the grand scheme of courtly love. Her role is to serve as the embodiment of Finamore, to allow the troubadour to express his devotion to the ideal. This reduces her to a functional symbol, a personification of an abstract concept, rather than an individual whose personal qualities are valued for their own sake. The object of the troubadour's affections is ultimately an ideal, not a woman. The woman herself becomes a placeholder for this greater concept, rendering her an interchangeable vessel for the abstract ideal of love.